show for me to do today since I love to read. We're pleased to have with us today in the studio our first guest, Len Kalkworth, resident here. Good morning, Len.
Good to be with you.
He just told me he's got his Thanksgiving necktie on, and it has lobster on it. Well, anyway. Len has written a new book, and it's called Exploring the Libraries of the U.S. Presidents. And Len, you and your wife took it upon yourself to start visiting these libraries, sort of accidentally, wasn't it?
Yes, we decided to visit the first library out in Illinois, which was that of Abraham Lincoln, on our way to visiting my relatives out in Iowa. And along the way, we also decided to stop in Iowa at West Branch, which is the library of Herbert Hoover. And that kind of got us started. Mm-hmm. And the more we saw, the more we wanted to see. So then we kept on moving on. At the time, at that particular trip, we also went down to Independence, Missouri to see Harry Truman's library. And then we went to Kansas to visit Ike's library. And then to Little Rock, Arkansas to visit Bill Clinton. And that was our first trip. And then after that, we made individual trips, or sometimes in addition to other trips we were making, we went to see other libraries as well.
So you saw 5 libraries that first
time,
go around,
yes.
and that was 5 out of 13.
Out of 12 at that time.
12 at that time.
Now it's 13. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, and we saw them all.
It's surprising to me that there are only 13.
Well, it started, you see, with actually FDR, and after FDR had his, then Herbert Hoover also wanted to have his library, and that's the beginning, really. And we spread from Herbert Hoover on to George W. Bush. These are the libraries that are now.
I see.
There are other libraries, by the way, but they are not part of the official libraries under the Archives and Records Administration of the federal government. There are libraries, for example, like Rutherford Hayes in Ohio, Abraham Lincoln in Springfield, Illinois. That one, by the way, in Illinois is owned by the state of Illinois. Rutherford Hayes, I think, is independently owned by friends of Hayes. Mm-hmm. There are a few others. None of them are quite as elaborate as the ones that I've just mentioned.
Yeah, what Jefferson didn't have, not that, I mean, his stuff was all at the Library of Congress, right?
That's right. And of course, George Washington, right here in Mount Vernon, but again, it's not part of the official library, but his library is there.
So your new book is covering those official 13 libraries.
Yeah. And I ought to mention that when we talk about libraries, presidential libraries, it's not a typical library. It's not where you go and check out books type of thing. It's the depository for all of the presidential papers that belong to that particular president. So if you want to do some research regarding some position of a particular president, you go to their library and do the research. That's where they all are. Mm-hmm. And as far as we're concerned, and most tourists are concerned, you don't go to the library so much, but you go to the museum that's attached to it. Mm-hmm. And the museum has all kinds of displays regarding the presidency of that particular president, which is very, very interesting. Yeah. By the way, I was at the White House. It was last year at the White House when I heard the archivist of the White House speak. And he made the big point that every paper that is touched by the president is recorded and kept and then is stored and sent to the new library. Like Obama's papers, for example, any paper that he signed and handled is preserved in the archives. And when his library is finished, they will box them up and ship them to the library. And all the papers will there.
And his library is going to be in Chicago?
In Chicago, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I knew there was a debate about where that was going to be. Yeah, that was just
established recently, just in the last few months.
Because they didn't know if Hawaii or...
Right. Well, too bad it's not in Hawaii. We'd go to Hawaii.
Oh, my, you and your wife would love that, wouldn't you?
Yes, indeed.
Now, are all the presidents now obliged to have libraries? Or?
Not necessarily obliged to have libraries, but because of the act of the Congress in 1978, all papers that belong to the president belong to the public, not to the president. Prior to that, papers belonged to the president, and as a result, they were scattered all over. The early presidents, their papers may belong to a family, it may belong to some society, some investor may have bought all of them, and it may not even be all together, for example.
And they may be lost.
And some are lost. In fact, Calvin Coolidge destroyed all of his papers immediately after his presidency was over.
Any reason why he did that?
I have no idea.
Okay, I didn't know if,
No, I don't know.
Historians had figured that out.
Well,
why
they
he did that.
they may have, but I do not know. Also, Zachary Taylor, who all of his papers were, I think, kept by his son, somewhere in the South. I forget which state it was. And then when the Civil War took place, the Union Army went through and they burned down the house, and as a result, all of his papers were destroyed. And there are other papers just scattered all over the place. But now, because of the act of Congress, the papers are all put in one place, and they do not belong to the president. They belong to the public.
Well, that's a good thing, I think.
Well, I think it's a good thing too.
Yeah.
When the libraries were built, after a number of the libraries were built, some people were complaining because these were being paid for by the taxpayer. However, in the beginning, these were all privately owned when they were first established, and 20% of the cost of maintaining the library had to be placed into an endowment to pay for it. Now, any president that's inaugurated after early 2000, 60% has to be set aside in an endowment fund to maintain the library.
So that means the taxpayer's only responsible for 40%.
Only 40%.
Of the maintenance and upkeep
Right.
of the library.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
I suppose the security guards, people there are government employees then?
Well, I would think so.
Or maybe not. I don't know. That's just...
Well, it was interesting. In all of the libraries we went to, the last one that was established was George W. Bush. And it was the first time that we had to go through security check.
Oh, really?
And none of the others. Now, I was not very happy with the fellow because when we walked in, I made some comment about the fact that, I never went through any of the security checks before. I just was kind of curious. And he barked at me and he said, "No guns, no guns." Well, and then right after that, we went back to Austin, Texas to once again visit LBJ's library. And as we walked in, the greeting was something like, "Howdy, partner," So it's such a contrast.
Very casual.
Yeah, but it may be that any building such as a library now has to have security checks.
It probably does,
It's
yeah.
probably true. But I was kind of surprised when we went into George W.'s library.
Well, now, when you and Bev started doing this, did you have any intention, or did you start collecting stuff to put in such a book?
No, not at all. In fact, I had no idea that I was going to write a book. And at the beginning, I had no idea we were going to visit all of the libraries. Of course, since then, we visit not only all the libraries, but we've also been to every presidential site pertaining to all previous presidents. So we went to all 43. But no, I had no idea I was going to write a book. And when I did decide just a few years ago to write it, about 2 years ago, I guess it is, the first thought came to me, I didn't take any notes. And then it dawned upon me, I have lots and lots of pictures that I took. And so I looked at the pictures, and they were better than any notes that I would have taken, because as soon as I saw a picture, I just recalled a lot of things that I had seen and what was in the library. So
Picture's worth 1,000 words.
yes,
or
and
whatever.
in this case, much more than that. And by the way, speaking about pictures, I do have a picture of every exterior of every presidential library in here, plus a number of other pictures that I took interior and so on. So
I love some of that. I love that Harry Truman picture. He's just so happy. It was probably the day he left office.
It could be. He was very, very active in his library, after his presidency. He would went to his library every day, He had his office there, and he would greet tours and talk to them and take them through the library and so on.
Well, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
Well, listen, so the reader will know, or our viewers will know, this book is set up in the order in which you and Bev saw them.
That's right.
It's not necessarily in the order they were established or
Right.
The presidencies or anything
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
So just so you won't get confused.
Well,
and
however, in the table of contents and in the book itself, it lists all of the presidential libraries in the order in which they were established. So
the way they were established.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
saw that in
Yeah.
there, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this book is, you have it in hardback,
Yes.
softback,
All right, an electronic.
and an ebook
Yeah.
that we just found out is available for $3.99.
Right. All right.
And then this book, called, the hardback is
29.
$29.
And the soft cover is 12. And I didn't establish the
I
price.
was going to say the price was established by the publisher,
Right,
not
so,
by Lynn.
Yeah.
And
And the content is identical.
in all three.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And I asked you before we went on the air, did you give one to the president, the current president, so he'll get some ideas?
No, I did not.
Which one did you like the best?
Well,
architecturally, let's say that.
Well, let me say, there's several things. First of all, it's in the eye of the beholder. And in this case, it's probably in the eye of one's political leaning.
It could be.
But in terms of beauty, there's no question about it. Ronald Reagan's place on the top of the mountain out in California is just absolutely fantastic. And when you stand there and you look at the mountains and the valleys, it's great. Mm-hmm. And it's also a huge library, so large that the one room has the Air Force One in it, including the Marine helicopter and the limousine that he rode in and so on. And there's plenty of room for party in addition to that. And when, if you saw the Republican debate, the first one I guess it was held there in that particular.
Republican
right,
debate.
Several weeks ago. It was held in that particular room, yeah. Now, some of the other, it's interesting, Bill Clinton, his library is very futuristic, and it's in the form of a bridge. And in that symbolizes the fact that he was had the bridge between the 20th and 21st century. That was his theme of his.
That was his theme, yeah.
Right. Gerald Ford has two sites. His library is in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and his museum is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he lived and where he was congressman. Yeah. Eisenhower's in Kansas is a beautiful setting, a nice large campus. I really was impressed with that. Saw his home. But as far as the library was concerned, or the museum was concerned, it did not have a lot about his presidency. It was mostly about his military career, which was fine, but it was different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the other one that very impressive is Richard Nixon's, which I didn't expect after having left Reagan's, which was so beautiful, to see Richard Nixon's and all the things that are in his library and museum. There's a tremendous flower garden right outside of the museum building. I don't know how many different varieties of flowers are there. Then the house in which he was born, which was built by his father from a builder's kit, you know, like the kind that they used to be able to order from Sears and Roebuck. Yeah,
Sears.
That's right. That's there. There's a tremendous display now about Watergate, which was not in there originally, and because it was not in there originally, it could not become part of the official library. And after they dealt with that for some time, I think the director resigned because he just did not want this. But the display. In
other words, they didn't want anything that might disparage
the
presidency of a given president.
At least the friends of Nixon, you see.
But now they have to do that.
They have to do that.
Wherever the.
Yeah, every presidential library is supposed to be balanced, although to some extent I'm not so sure. You know, they still put the best face on for the president.
Sure, sure.
The other library that's very interesting and which I really enjoyed is Lyndon Johnson's in Austin, Texas. The building itself is not impressive. It's a 10-story, they call it a pyramid, but the contents is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And then we went over to see his ranch, which is, you know, really ought to see both. Yeah. And that also was an interesting experience. There's a runway right in the middle of the ranch that he would land, Air Force One would land there, for example.
You know, we're not going to tell everything in the book, but the way anybody could buy one of these books, they could call you, I suppose.
Yes, yeah.
But the other way is you're going to have a table at the Christmas
Bazaar, which is in early December.
Yeah, December 3rd, I believe it is.
December 3rd, yeah.
And so they'll be able to know. I'm telling you, it's worth it if you, and you know, maybe, as I said, giving it to a history teacher or somebody that wants to just focus on those libraries.
Oh, make an ideal Christmas present.
Yes, it would.
Yeah.
Len, we have to wrap it up, I'm
Okay.
sorry to say, because I always enjoy, as you know, our presidential stuff that we do.
Yes.
And we're going to do another one in January, right?
That's right. And this time we'll be on FDR.
On FDR in January. We'll be back on the air. Thank you very much for coming. Yeah. Okay, stay tuned, and we will bring in our next guests, Elaine Sorensen and Ken Plummer, regarding the Fairfax County Access Library.